Welcome to another episode of Ask the DM. I'm Andrew Block, and today we're going to talk about being a more interesting role player. A lot of players, when they build their characters, they make their decisions solely based on how each ability or feat or whatever complements each other, such as picking the appropriate race for the appropriate class and such like that. Well, in order to make more interesting characters, you need to think a little bit outside of that box. It would be more interesting for you, for the other players, and for the GM if you chose something that didn't particularly mesh very well. In Dungeons and Dragons, for instance, the half-elf gets a plus bonus to its charisma, which makes them ideal for classes that use charisma, such as the bard or sorcerer, or I even think the warlock uses it. But that also follows down a cliche path, that starts to stereotype them into the cliches that we all know and have seen a zillion times over and over and over again. The dwarf fighter, the elf mage, the human paladin, and the list goes on and on and on. These are standard, almost Tolkien tropes that we need to, as players and as GMs, we need to kind of break that mold. Pick a class and race that don't particularly complement each other. This can create a much more interesting dynamic. Second thing you can do is don't focus so much on being totally efficient. Try not to think in terms of what's going to benefit me the most and penalize me the least. That's a thing that we call is min-maxing, power gaming, or I believe it's even referred to as munchkinning. That's boring. That's video game mentality, trying to create the best character that's going to help you beat the game. Well, unfortunately, in a role-playing game, a true tabletop role-playing game, you don't beat it. It goes on for as long as you need it to, as long as you want it to. And the story is going to progress no matter how you look at it. Whether you fail that particular event or you succeed at that event, the story is going to continue moving on. It's not like a video game where if you fail that event, the story doesn't progress and you have to reload and try again. No, there's none of that happening in a tabletop role-playing game, which means that, the best decisions aren't always going to be the most interesting decisions. Now, this doesn't mean, as some players take it, don't pick what's going to be the best for your character. By all means, pick what you think is going to be best, but don't do it in a way that's all you think about. Maybe take into account your character's background and what they've been training for, or what their total experiences have, what kind of effect those experiences have had on them, of the adventures that they've had recently. That's what experience points are actually supposed to represent. They're not just points to get to the next level. They're called experience points. They represent the experiences that you've had, and those should translate into something meaningful for those characters, not just the best advancement. A character also needs to be a team player. He cannot be a lonely loner. These characters do not work. They end up alienating themselves and alienating the rest of the party. And if the party has already got a good cohesiveness going, they're going to ignore that player. They're going to ignore that character. If that character's like, I don't need to interact with anybody, I don't need to make friends, the rest of the party's going to be like, okay, we'll see you later, we're going to go deal with this thing. If you want to join, we'll see you there later. And then those players will get the spotlight and the game time, all that other player's just sitting there by himself because he just chose to play a lonely loner. And those players aren't any fun for the other group. Now, you can play loners within the group. Maybe they don't open up so easy. Maybe they kind of keep to themselves, but they are willing to work with other players, and they do develop a little bit of a rapport with the rest of the characters. If you make a character who doesn't do any of these things and doesn't want to do any of these things, then you would be better off playing a one-on-one game with your DM and not dragging the rest of the party down. Another thing to do in order to keep your character interesting is separate yourself from the character. This is a hard one to do. Even experienced role players and experts, so to speak, have a problem doing this. And what this means is taking yourself out of the character. You know, a lot of us like to make characters that are they're different than us, but they're mostly representations of ourselves. That way we don't have to act any differently when we get to the table. We can just be ourselves and it'll translate into the character. Unfortunately, this is kind of boring, you know. If you make a dwarf fighter, don't make, you know, if Joe makes a dwarf fighter, don't make Joe the dwarf fighter. Give him his own personality, give him his own characteristics, his own quirks, his own being. This is supposed to represent a person in a living world, not you being transferred into this living world. We get enough of ourselves in real life. Why on earth would you want to, in a realm of high fantasy and things that don't normally happen, why would you want to be yourself? That doesn't make any sense. Speaking of quirks and characteristics and personality things, give your character a flaw that makes itself apparent. You know, it doesn't have to be debilitating, it doesn't have to be mechanically bringing the character down, but give him something that sets him apart, something that causes him to mess up things. You know, maybe he gets nervous under pressure. You know, if you're playing a rogue that's nervous under pressure and, you know, the room is filling up with water due to a trap and he has to disable the trap, maybe he fumbles a little bit and, you know, just role play that out. It doesn't have to be, oh, you know, I automatically fail the roll because he's nervous. No. It doesn't have to be to that extent. Just role play. You know, maybe he's fidgeting a little bit and it's taking him a little longer than normal, and you know, you got the other characters yelling at him, hurry up, and he's like, shh, quiet, I gotta concentrate on what I'm doing here, otherwise it's not gonna work. You got the gear up here and the pulley here. I need to concentrate. You know, that makes for an interesting scene. It adds suspense, intensity. It makes the scene come alive instead of just saying, oh, I'm rolling my disabled trap roll. Okay, I succeed. What happens? Well, the water starts pouring in. Okay. You know, that was boring. You know, adding that little bit of a thing to it made it much more interesting, even though it was the same situation. Next thing you can do, always look forward to the next adventure. Always look forward to the next adventure. I can't say this one enough. I preach it to my players. I preach it to new GMs. I preach it to old GMs. Always look forward to the next adventure. If you're not playing adventurers who are looking forward to the next adventure, what are you doing? This game is about adventures, D&D in particular. They might call them something else in different games. You know, they may not be strictly adventures, but look forward to expanding the story, expanding the plot, developing your characters as people within these worlds that you're playing in, dealing with these situations. And that's pretty much all I have to say on this subject today. If you have any suggestions for a subject you'd like to be delved into on Ask the DM, please leave it in the comments below or send me an email and I'll get to answering it and maybe even put it in a video here pretty soon. We'll be recording the sessions that I do play. I will be putting an introduction up pretty soon about what's been going on in those adventures so far. And I'm also planning on starting a couple new videos here. One will be called Table Talk, where me and a couple of the other guys around the table will get together and just talk about some various things. I think the first episode we want to do is 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons, 2 years later. It's been nearly 2 years since it's come out, and I want to get my players' opinions on how it compares to older versions of Dungeons & Dragons and other games. Another one I want to do is a short called Afterlife Spotlight, where we get players together and they talk about their most memorable death scenes or mishaps or bungles or even heroic moments. Hopefully we'll get enough subscribers and viewers to where we can expand this thing into something really great, something that'll help other players and GMs really expand their gaming chops. Like I said, if you have a topic you'd like to see here on Ask the DM, or if you have a question that needs to be answered, please leave it in the comments below. Happy gaming, everyone, and keep those dice rolling. I'll talk to you later.